I think I'm going to unplug my phone. I'm plenty charged, but when it just sits here on for an hour, I usually keep it plugged in so it doesn't get low. Oh well, we've got other people while I was talking. How is everybody?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing well.
You
You're
got held up
sounding,
doing something. Um, so
yeah,
he
well,
won't be with us today.
and I don't think Susan's going to be with us. I'm not sure exactly what she's might be doing, but she didn't answer her phone. And I don't remember her telling me. Well, I know she didn't tell me Sunday what she was doing, so she could be having a doctor's appointment, or I don't think Marty's coming today, but I could be wrong.
You never know.
And it,
You're not the only one.
oh, well, you're sounding much better every day.
Yes, I'm feeling much better every day. I went back to the gym yesterday for the first time in forever.
Uh,
It's bad when they start calling you and trying to find out where you were. But um, I met Tony at Crafty Draft on Friday. He wanted to talk about something and have a beer, and so went over there and with the intention I was going to go to the gym after that. And while I was there, I saw a familiar child walk past, and I was like, "Is that who I think it is?" And I went out to the porch on the at Crafty Draft and didn't see the parent. And I was going to text the parent when I got to the car just to see if was is your kid at Crafty Draft? And his dad drove up. Well, they're the owners of the gym.
oh,
And so didn't make it to the gym because I had a couple more beers with the owner of the gym. So we all decided that was an excused absence.
right.
But Stacy and I made it back yesterday. I'll be returning today, but I think we kind of swapped what we had because the first day I was out of work, she was out of work too, feeling crummy. But hers was mostly up here, and mine was all in my chest,
Right.
and I'd had a fever and stuff like that. Well, she went back to school the next day, and I was basically out for. I mean, like I showed up for. I was at Shrove Tuesday, and that was all I could handle. I was there basically all day on Ash Wednesday, and that was awful. And then I was laid up until Sunday rolled around and came back out and, started making more appearances at the office the week after that. But, um, and then along about Wednesday last week, Stacy ended up with the chest part, and I
Oh,
it moved to my head. And so the plagues that we had, we just swapped them. And she got the worst end of it because the worst part was definitely what I had first.
right.
Um, and so for the last, I guess, week or so, I sounded worse than I was, but
Mm,
it set up camp in my head and my throat, and so that knocks out singing or anything like that.
right. Right.
Now, and energy, though, it took a while. Like Sunday was really the first day I felt kind of normal.
Hmm.
But so if you recall, what we're doing during Lent is we are following the 40 for Lent thing that Health and Wellness gave out. Basically, the reading through the Gospel of John. And we've studied the Gospel of John together before, so I'm going to do it a bit differently because I'm going to cover what we should have read if you're doing that over the last week, which would have been John 4:27, and today is six ends on 671. So basically, two chapters of John, and so we're not really going to like like I typically read through the whole thing and stuff. Well, that would end up being we we would just be reading the whole time because that's but pretty
Oh,
much two and a
yeah.
half, 3 chapters. And so and John's chapters, if you recall, are not short chapters. And so I need water. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with prayer, and then we're going to talk about the individual parts. So let's pray. God, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for an opportunity to study your word. As we journey to Lent, may the words of John speak to our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. So we start with the Samaritan woman, the woman at the well.
Mhm.
And so basically, I'm going to sum up this story by retelling it. So Jesus and his disciples were traveling, and on their way, they went through a Samaritan town, which is kind of strange. Not it was. I mean, that was not a comfortable place for Jews to be going through. Okay, they weren't wanted, and they didn't want to be there. Um, you know, the funny part about the whole Samaritan Jew issue is about the dumbest thing in the world. But I'm sure that if people look at the differences that we have in context, I mean, like years later, how kind of dumb that is. Um, it, it's sort of like, I mean, here in the South, for those folks who live up north, it used to be like a big difference between like the Italians and the Irish, and they didn't like each other. Okay, that's stupid. I mean, because down here, I guess we're all German, and so we're sort of intermingled. But hopefully, years from now, people, maybe we're starting to look at it this way. People will look at the different races and talk about why didn't they get along? That's just stupid. They're all living in the same place. They all, um, but their cultures are different. But like realizing that basically, especially for Jews and Samaritans, they still worship the same God. Unlike the other, you know, it's the other folks that they would have dealings with, they had a different God, but in some ways that made them hate each other more because it was an argument over who does it right. Um, and reading the scripture that I read, clearly neither one of them were doing it right because they had hatred for one another because of who did it right. And so they were going through this area. And so the Jesus stays behind while the rest of the disciples go into town to get food. And while they're there, it's about noon. And Jesus comes, this woman comes to town or shows up at the well. And Jesus says to her, "Hey, could you get me something to drink?" And well, um, they she's a little surprised by this, it's like, how is it that you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan, for something to drink? Because Jews and Samaritans didn't mix, right? I mean, like, he shouldn't be drinking water that a Samaritan got. That's dirty water. That's awful. Um, and and so then Jesus goes through this whole exchange about being if you drink this water, you'll never be thirsty. And he's like, go and tell your husband. And she goes, I don't have a husband. And he goes, you're right. You don't have a husband. You've had like 5 husbands, I think. What is it? Let's see. Um,
Mm. You're right.
yeah, 5 husbands, and the one that you're currently living with isn't your husband. And uh, that's all actually what we picked up on last week, or would have. And then it starts today with her, the disciples coming and being shocked with who he was talking to. Um, you know, why are you talking with this? with this, and it's a twofold problem. One, she's a Samaritan, and two, she's a woman. And and sort of a shameful. I mean, we don't have details, but what we know is this: she is getting water at like noon, and that is not a time that the typical women would go and get water. So she apparently didn't want to be around other people. Now people have said, is she shacking up with somebody? We don't know. The man she could be living with could be her brother or, her father. I mean, or her son. We don't know. People have assumed that she's a sinful woman, but we don't know that either. What we know is that Jewish men did not talk to women by themselves, much less Samaritan women. And so his disciples are like, why are you talking with this woman? And so, and then meanwhile, she's in town. She's in town, telling everybody, come and see this man who has told me everything about me. And so the questions are, what in what ways who would we be surprised to find Jesus talking to?
Perhaps transgenders.
Yeah. I think that wouldn't. Who else? Oh, just so you know, by the way, in these, there's going to be a lot more question and answer, so you have to actually answer.
Well, I was just going to say that I typically wouldn't be surprised at him talking to anybody.
No, I wouldn't either, but
Yeah.
But I guess the question would be like, outside of our theology, who would some people be surprised to find Jesus talking to? Would probably be a better way to answer that. I know y'all. So
Okay.
who would, I mean, I don't think my mother would be very surprised to find Jesus talking to a trans person either.
no.
Being that she raised me, I know full well she wouldn't be surprised at that. But who would some people be surprised to find it?
Well, maybe a murderer.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people would suspect to find Jesus in prison.
Right. Going to talk to murderers, especially a murderer, as opposed to someone who was there for maybe shoplifting.
Here's the thing. A racist would not expect to find Jesus talking to people who aren't white. And other people would not expect to find Jesus talking to a racist.
Right.
Liberals would not expect to find Jesus talking to conservatives, and conservatives would not expect to find people talking to liberals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is, when like in church, when we say we accept all, most of the time, I think, and probably this is because of where we are, but I think this is in general. When we say that, the first place people automatically go to is the LGBTQ community, right? Accept all means we accept gays, but it's more than that. In some places, it's easier to accept a gay than it is a Hispanic or a black person. The most segregated day of the week in America is Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just the God to honest truth. Sunday is a segregated day of the year, a day of the week. Oh, well, and Sunday morning is the most segregated time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think any of us, anybody here, is going to be surprised to find Jesus in a black church or a Hispanic church or a,
Mm-mm.
I mean, but there would be people shocked to find Jesus in a detention center, in an ICE detention center or at the border, on either side. But acceptance of all means accepting people where they are. And hopefully we will all grow together in the way that Jesus wants. Clearly racism is bad. Homophobia is bad. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't think anybody here is disagreeing with me, but there are Christian people. Unfortunately, the voice of Christianity in America is one that most of us don't agree with. Some of the things being claimed and said right now on behalf of Jesus are not the things that my Jesus would say. The message that we hear on Sunday mornings are quite different. And so honestly, if it's me, I'd be shocked to find Jesus in those churches.
Yeah, but he would be there telling them where, trying to love them into understanding the right thing.
Right.
Yeah. But of course, this past Sunday, we have him telling the Pharisees, your house is left to you. Fine, have it your way.
Yeah.
He started out in the temples. So did Paul. And then they would go to the people who were sick. The people who need the love. But God loves us all and wants us to be where we're supposed to be. And where we're supposed to be ain't telling everybody else where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And I guess Jesus just got tired of talking to a brick wall.
Could be. Which is why he's talking to this woman here. One of the questions I ask is, what does it mean when she left? She left her water behind. What does it mean to leave your water behind and follow Jesus?
Well, to me, it said she was coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. And she did, actually.
Yeah.
And she was bringing other people with her.
Yeah, and it was prioritizing what she felt was the most important to do at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, also, but it is pretty funny. The whole purpose that she went there was to get that water, and then she forgot it.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like something I would do. And not to put myself as holy, but that's something I would do just because I'm absent-minded a lot of times, and I go places for a sole purpose of doing something and then leave without it. But
We all do that. Yeah.
some more than others. So the next thing is the healing of the official son in John 4:43 to 54. And so what's going on here is that it was a royal official whose son was in Capernaum, and Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, so he's in Gentile land again. And the guy wanted his sign sealed, and then Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. The official said to him, sir, come down with me before my little boy dies. And Jesus said, go, your son will live. The man believed Jesus and spoke to him and started on his way. As he was going down, his slaves met him and said his child would live. So he asked when that happened, and it was the time that he saw Jesus. And so basically, Jesus is like, you want signs and wonders, but Jesus said, your son will live, and that's all it took. The like, which was interesting because of who he's telling that to. This was not a lot of the people that Jesus encounters along the way were common folk, uneducated folk, probably, just normal run of the mill people. But this guy was a royal official. He wasn't just a run of the mill. These are the kinds of people, there's a guy that I knew that was a member at Pilgrim, and he used to say, in God we trust, everybody else bring numbers. In God we trust, everybody else bring numbers. In other words, bring proof, bring, you trust God, but you better have some data to back it up. Don't you just run at me with some half-cocked idea. I need to see how it's all laid out. And so this is kind of a numbers guy. That this is a guy who would want proof, who would want, some sort of authority, like proof of Jesus' authority. But that's not what happened here. And so, how does the official's faith grow through this experience?
Well, he would also be someone who is used to people doing what he says.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was willing to do what Jesus said without saying, but I want you to come with me. He was, he didn't even question when he said, you just go back because your son is healed. And I would have expected, again, especially with someone who is used to getting what he asked for when he asked for it, the fact that he did not question but turned, that was a sign of definite faith. Question faith.
And also, even back then, a healer would have to lay hands on someone,
right, or say something, or
right, give them a salve, or
right.
Just like today,
right,
calling the doctor on the phone and the doctor saying you're better. It doesn't work that way. And so that's not the way that healings worked back then either.
Right.
And so for him to be okay with Jesus just saying he's better.
Yeah. Well, and even the healings that Jesus did, you had the putting of mud on the eyes, and he had used those kinds of things with other situations sort of like this. And so the fact that he did not, again, I would think that the official would have thought, well, why aren't you coming to do something?
And I don't know this, but I'm not sure that I think this might be the only time that Jesus doesn't go. That Jesus heals from afar. He didn't heal Lazarus.
No.
He
waited till
there.
he was there.
Yeah, he waited till he's dead. But he could have healed Lazarus from where he was too.
Right. But he did go.
Yeah.
Is there not another story where a girl is healed like that?
Jairus' daughter.
Yeah. I don't think he went there.
That I think he did, because he went in there and said, Talitha cum, little girl, get up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
I've forgotten. But And I probably
He was already dead when he got there, like Lazarus.
Okay.
okay.
Because that's when he encounters all those people who kind of laughed at him when they said she's just sleeping, and they're like, "Oh no, she's not."
Okay.
Because I thought of that one too. And I think we're running up on it is another. He's also a important person.
Yeah.
Right.
And the question here is, how has God answered prayers in unexpected ways in your life?
No, you were kidding.
What's that, Margaret?
He didn't know he was going to lose a kidney.
Yeah.
Well,
and that'll be an answered prayer when he gets the new knee to go with the new knee, less kidney.
That's right.
well, and there's in my life there's been too many to count. Quite frankly, so, and again, it is faith on our part because he physically doesn't come and heal or answer prayer, but he did it.
Yeah.
Because you just know he did it.
Well, the most recent one for me was Bill was in the hospital and the social worker was saying that he couldn't go back to the Elms, which is the Alzheimer's unit he's in, that he would have to go to a total care facility since he couldn't get up on his own. And I prayed and I cried because I felt like that was where Bill needed to be. And the head nurse came and said, Sherry, I think we'll have to get an aide to come in and help him for a while. But I think he can get back to the fact that he only needs one person instead of two people to get him up. And we've reached that.
Yeah.
So my prayer was answered.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you reached beyond that. Now he doesn't need anybody to get him up.
What?
Now you don't. Now he doesn't need anybody to get him up, does he?
Well, yes, because he is sometimes stubborn and doesn't want to get up.
Okay, well that's a different story. I mean, but
can
physically
and a will.
he can get up if he wants to.
Yeah. Yeah. They found him one morning sitting on his couch and he had gotten himself up. He had rearranged the bathroom. Now, I did not ask what that entailed, but he was sitting on the couch and he had gotten up and walked and done all that. And that was the first time he had done that. So, yeah.
Well, he probably organized it.
That's what I said. Bill was real organized, but anyway, but now he's really come along, and occupational therapy came yesterday, and they've installed one of the high commodes, the so that he didn't have to go down as far. They are getting a bar outside the shower and a different shower chair. So they're doing things to help him that will allow him to stay there. And that was an answer to prayers.
I'm surprised they haven't already installed all of these things.
I know, that's what the occupational therapist said. She said, I can't believe that this is not. Well, there's a shower chair. There's a shower chair in there, but it's in a corner. Well, they can't really get to him, and he feels pushed in the corner.
Yeah.
And so, they're doing that. And the couch he likes to sit on is low. So I had to order these things to put on the bottom of the chairs to lift it so that he is already up higher.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, my prayers have been answered marvelously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and speaking of that, the next part is in John 5, 1-15, the healing at the pool of Siloam. I'm assuming it's the pool of Siloam. It just says the pool. And so there was this pool, and basically, I mean, everybody would come and they would get in the pool, and that's how they were healed. But then there was this poor paralyzed guy, and he would hang out there every day, and when the water got stirred up, that's when you had to get in. Well, because he couldn't walk, he couldn't exactly get himself there. He was a poor beggar, and so nobody was there to help him get there. And so, like, he was there day after day just hoping to get lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess people would just move him away from it, or I don't know. I mean, after a while, I think I would have gotten closer to just fall in. But maybe, too, he was worried that if he fell in, he couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And so Jesus says, well, take your mat and walk. And so he gets up and walks. And now he had been this way for 38 years.
Mm.
At least that's what Chat GPT says, and I'm trying to find out.
It's in
Yeah, it
verse
says 38.
5.
Yeah, verse 5. So he had been paralyzed for 38 years. And so the day that he's healed is the Sabbath. And I don't think that I have to explain to y'all about why that is a bad thing. That Jesus did that. And he seems to do that a lot in John. It's almost like he wants to poke the bear.
Yeah.
When it comes to that. And so, that becomes an issue. If you've ever watched the show The Chosen, this particular issue is kind of it's stressed in there. And they actually make it out to be that this guy is connected to I think one of the disciples, like it's his brother or some zealot, or he's connected to the story in some way, which is, I mean, that's totally made up. But it's interesting, that they show this guy, he's playing with his brother gets hurt, and then he's left there to do that. Well, I actually know what it is. It's Simon the Zealot's brother. And so Simon the Zealot is supposed to kill somebody, because that's what zealots did. And he comes into town and he sees his brother walking, and who he had lost touch with because, he was paralyzed, and, he went off to fight against the Roman oppression. So he was supposed to go in and kill a Roman. And right as he's about to do it, his brother walks by carrying his mat. And, then he wants to find out how he got healed and stuff like that. Like I said, there's a bunch that's not biblical, but it makes for an interesting story. Because we often forget about the ripple effect of what Jesus did. This guy was healed. What about his family? What about, the people sitting there that watched the man take up his mat and walk? And, one of the things and think about this. There's a guy that we know has been all right, we'll use Susie for example. All right. As long as we've known her, she's been blind, right? I mean, Margaret and Steve, were y'all here before when she could still see?
Yeah. She could see a little bit.
She could see a little bit, but I mean, for most of her life, she's been blind.
Right.
Imagine if she can see because this guy named Jesus heals her. And he does it on a Sunday morning. What is your response going to be?
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that too many of us are going to be like, wow, well, that's awful. I can't believe you did that. But
No.
now,
Not
but now,
nowadays.
but now, let me give you another example of something different, but maybe similar. So, when I was at Pilgrim, it was in the healthy time, as it's known, and we probably had 30 visitors a week. I mean, the church was just growing leaps and bounds, but it was growing at the contemporary service. The traditional service was not. It wasn't growing really at all, uh, and um, and so a lot of the people that were there who had been there since the beginning um, were not fans of the fact that the church was growing because they disagreed with how it was happening because it wasn't their style. Um, I think that's kind of similar. Uh, because I mean, we weren't, it's not like we were watering down the gospel. It's not like we were, you know, doing anything that was anti-Jesus. Um, but we weren't doing things the way that they thought that they should be done or the way that they had always been done. And so that was upsetting. And in many ways, that's what we see going on here. It's that these folks, these Jews are upset because, and when I say Jew, do not take that as an anti-Semitic statement. That's just the way that John explains it. I mean, because what I'm saying is ain't no different than what Christians are like now. They were very protective of their faith and the way that it had always been. And let's be honest, the Sabbath was a big rule for them, sort of like the Green Book used to be a big rule for us, you know? And so when those changes happen, it's threatening. So much so that we can forget to celebrate what's going on, the work that God's doing, because we don't think God's doing it the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's a lot of people. I mean, Mount Horeb, I don't always agree with their theology, especially here lately in their stance on the gay community. I mean, they did spend like $10 million to not be United Methodist anymore, because of the gay thing, which I think is, you know, there's a lot that could have been done with $10 million. But at any rate, they do good ministry, and I celebrate what they do there. But there's a lot of people who do not. You know, I believe that God is at work in that place. God's at work in a lot of places.
So cool.
You know, and so I think that it's not necessarily the place that God calls me. But you know, I think that there's something to be said about God. God doesn't have to fit our box, and that's what I think that the folks in this passage were struggling with. That Jesus healed him on the Sabbath, and that, you know, that it ticked people off because that's not the way that God works. God certainly wouldn't work on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
You know, but that's, I mean,
No saying God go get you for that.
yeah,
Eventually.
yeah. All right, so let's move on to the feeding of the 5,000 in chapter 6. So I mean, this is a there's a let's see if this is the one, because they're all a bit different. This, by the way, John's version is the one where it's the little boy that has the 5 barley loaves and the 2 fish. This is the only one where it's a little boy that has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. The rest of them is just they have 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And this one, you have this more of a sort of a back and forth with the disciples, namely Philip, who's like 6 months' wages wouldn't be enough to buy bread for these people to eat even a little bit. You know, Philip's a numbers guy, and can't blame him. And then, you know, and here, they say, you know, there's a have them sit down, and there's 5,000 in all. Jesus took the loaves, and when he given thanks, he distributed to them, to the ones who were seated. So also the fish, and as much as they wanted. When they were all satisfied, he told the disciples, gather up the fragments left over so that nothing will be lost. So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. Those 12 baskets, incidentally, symbolize the 12 tribes of Israel, basically all nations. There was more than enough for everybody, which is the message, I think, that comes from this. That through Jesus, there's more than enough for everybody. And it all happened because one boy shared his stuff.
Well, and anytime I read that story, I think, and when the boy shared his stuff, a lot of other people realized, you know, I can share mine too.
Well,
and so it
that's not
opened
exactly
up.
how the miracle worked.
No, but
I
I
mean,
think it's still a miracle if it opened the hearts of people to share.
somebody's at your house.
Yeah, I don't know what. They didn't ring the doorbell. They just came on. Maybe somebody doing the yard.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, yes, that's exactly, I mean, that's a possibility. Or Jesus did a miracle and fed everybody. I mean, both of them would have been very miraculous. In John's gospel, I think it's more the stress of the miraculous. And some of the others, where the wording says, you give them something to eat. When Jesus said, how are we going to feed all these people? And Jesus says to them, you give them something to eat. Those are some of the other gospel readings, and you could probably read that. And which again, if everybody gives a little, it goes a long way. And such as it is with offerings, with all of us sharing a little bit of what we have, you know, and I think the world would be a much better place if we. I'm not saying socialism. Don't hear me wrong. But you know, I think, and part of that is because yes, there are some that need complete and utter assistance, but there's a lot of people who they could give part of their stuff too. And so, I mean, honestly, the problem with socialism is sin, and sin plus socialism equals communism.
Mm-hmm.
That's why socialism doesn't work, is because we're sinners. I mean, that by the way was the biblical community was a socialist community. That was the way, like in the early first church was socialist, because it says that they they had all things in common. But it didn't last because eventually people started holding stuff back to take care of themselves. Why? Because we're all a bunch of sinners. And so, but Jesus does provide. And sometimes that includes using us to provide. All right. Well, let's close it out with Jesus walks on water. Actually, there's two more things in there. Well, we can probably pick up the other one some next week because he talks about being the bread of life. And I think I've preached enough about Jesus being the bread of life that
How many Sundays are there bread
5.
Sundays? 5.
And that was last year. And I still would like to come across and smack whoever decided that was fun to do in the lectionary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just obscene. But Jesus walks on water. So this always trips me out. Is like the disciples went ahead across to Capernaum and just left Jesus behind. And it's like, oh, okay. And then they see something coming at them and they're totally freaked out, which I think we can all understand that if we saw someone walking to us on water, that would be a little bit off-putting. You know, I would be terrified. You know, and they were like, you know, because I mean, they were like 3 or 4 miles out, it said. And he said, and now I don't know which gospel it is where Peter walks to him on water. That's the much better story. In John, and just they see Jesus, he gets in the boat and they're there. They made it to the other side. And then when they get there, that's when the whole bread of life thing kicks in, because they get there and Jesus is like, they're like, hey, how'd you get here? And he doesn't answer the question. He's like, yeah, okay. What you wanted was basically, you're not coming looking for the bread of life. You're coming and looking because I fed you yesterday. You want a good meal. You want the Son of Man to be a vending machine for you. But what I'm telling you is the true bread is eternal life. I'm the bread of life. You know, eat this, you'll never be hungry again. Drink of this, you'll never be thirsty. In other words, follow me and you won't want for anything. Now, this is not prosperity gospel. It's, you'll realize what's really important and you'll always have what you need. You may not have an abundance. You may not have everything you may not have everything you ever wanted, but you'll have everything you need. And so, you know, he goes on for an entire chapter about, I am the bread that comes down from heaven. And they're like, you know, Moses gave us manna in the wilderness. What are you going to give us? Which is really stupid because clearly, I mean, it's like, it's sort of like, well, how do I put, okay, well, like when Dad was teaching Religion 100 at Lenoir-Rhyne and realizing the biblical illiteracy of people that even grew up Christian, who didn't know anything. Well, you would think, though, the good Jewish people would know better than, oh, well, everybody was happy with the manna in the wilderness. No, they weren't, because they sat there and whined and complained the whole time. They were happy the first day, but long about day 3, they were tired of manna. And so, you know, they whined and whined and whined. But again, they were missing the point that Jesus is the bread from heaven. And then they were really upset when he said, the bread that I will give you is my flesh, which that for us is very sacramental language. it's that body and blood that Jesus gives us through the holy meal. All right. Any questions about the walk that we have had through John thus far, as we move through this book towards the cross of Lent, or the cross of Good Friday? Well, alrighty then. We will pick up next week in chapter 7. And let's see. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically 7 through 9. I think. It's either 7 through 9 or 7 into 10. I didn't count it well, but I'll know by next week.
Good.
So, all right, folks, y'all have an excellent day, and I will see you one way or another soon.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Because I know I got a copy of that sheet about what we're supposed to be reading and when. I cannot find it. Is it online anywhere from the help?
I think I had Robin. Mom, can you? Okay, hold on, Diane. I just realized I emailed it to my mother last week.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So I will email it to you now.
Well, thank you very, very much, because I know I had it, but apparently I have. It's probably in a stack of mail, as opposed, somewhere I have put it that I cannot put my hands on it.
Yep, I have it right here.
Okay.
Stephen,
Yeah.
do you need me to send it back to you or?
No. I've got it.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing that.
No problem.
Because I was going to start searching through stuff from Robin to see if, or looking at a bulletin, as an attachment somewhere, and I thought that's going to take me forever. But
all right. There it is.
okay. Thank you very
Hold
much.
on, Diane. D-I. There it is. Diane Steelman at Gmail.
That's it.
All right. It's on the way.
All right. Thank you much.
All right. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.